The views expressed by Mr. Sterling are deeply offensive and harmful. Sentiments of this kind are contrary to the principles of inclusion and respect that form the foundation of our diverse, multicultural, and multi-ethnic league.
The public acknowledgement of racism in professional basketball. It was a shock, but perhaps not a surprise. Since the earliest days, inequality and exclusion have been as much a part of the sport as passing and dribbling. In fact, if you were black and wanted to play professionally, you had very limited options. Most teams back in the 1930s and 40s weren't just predominantly white, they were exclusively white. But one team changed that, and in the process changed the sport of basketball. They were a group of exceptional athletes who battled racism and exploitation to help make basketball into the worldwide phenomenon it is today. They were called the Harlem Globetrotters.
You know, when you're a young black kid in America in the 40s, you loved Joe Louis and the Harlem Globetrotters.
The Harlem Globetrotters go into their famous warm-up circle before a turnout of 18,000 at Madison Square Garden.
To walk around Harlem and everybody know who you are and to be a star, like, you know, in those days, that was a hell of a feeling.
Even when crowding, they are experts at handling that ball.
I felt great to put on that red, white, and blue uniform with the stars on it and run on that court and hear all these thousands of people yelling and screaming.
We put the fun in the game. They're not giving us the recognition that we would have gotten because they're not publicizing us, they're publicizing the NBA.
Of course, they don't play this happy type of fun-making game all the time. When hard-pressed, they can play the game straight and fast in championship form.
The way basketball is played today is Harlem Globetrotter style that they now call Showtime.
Hello, I'm Julian Phillips. At every competition, they were the top attraction, but paid less than those they played against. Eager fans would line up for autographs, but wouldn't let them into their restaurants or hotels. They were sent as America's ambassadors to the Soviet Union, but treated as second-class citizens at home. They were the best of the best. They were the Harlem Globetrotters, and they were not playing the white man's game.
We started the three-point shot. People said it wouldn't work.
Heck, we were slam dunking before it was fashionable. Before people knew what slam dunking was, we did that.
Despite their name, the Harlem Globetrotters didn't originate in Harlem, but in Chicago. A sports entrepreneur saw the talent and the opportunity created by discrimination. It would turn out to be lightning in a bottle.
Abe Saperstein was the guy who figured out that black ball players couldn't play anyplace else.
Before the NBA, for men of color, came the Globetrotters. Abe and the Globetrotters gave men of color a chance to show the world that they were great athletes and great ambassadors.
He was smart enough to know that I've got a gold mine here. What option do they have? If they don't play for me, they can't play anywhere.
And play they did. As many as 350 games a year. Constantly on the road, they took on any and all white teams willing to accept the challenge, routinely beating them.
It's just that we were better ball players, and we had a much better team. We are as good, if not better, than you are. You got more opportunities. We don't have those opportunities. We are better, and the only reason that we don't have those opportunities is that our skin is dark.
Let's be a little bit fair, and maybe not so condescending here about the white players of that era. They were playing a different type of basketball. They did not have the jumping ability, the athleticism that a lot of the black players had, so they used what they had. They just couldn't do what the guys of color were able to do from the very, very, very beginning.
The Trotters brought more than just athletic excellence to the game. They brought their unique brand of showmanship.
It's the court comedy of Meadowlark Lemon, Wilt Chamberlain and company that draws the crowds and baffles the opposing team and the referees.
They played hometown teams and teams that traveled with them, including college all-stars. It wasn't just about watching them win, it was watching how they won.
It's good-natured clowning. They'll even give the ball away to set up an out-of-bounds play. How'd that happen? Nothing sacred and nobody safe when they cut loose.
Fans loved watching the amazing dribbling skills of Marques Haynes and the astounding antics of players like Meadowlark Lemon.
Meadowlark talks himself into a foul shot. When he gets on the line, watch those feet. He shoots. Really foul. Anything for a laugh and let the ref fall where he may.
Sore losers called them showboaters, just playing a schoolyard game.
Yeah, realistically looking at it, I mean, if you think about black or white ball players, everybody learned in the schoolyard. I mean, regardless of what area of the city you come from, what race you are, you learn to play in the schoolyard. But I think that at that particular time, in order to put some type of negative label on the black players as to why they're not in the league when they're beating everybody and everything that comes up, you have to say that they're this or they're that, they're not coachable, they're nothing but schoolyard players.
So they had to minimize the abilities by saying, oh, that's just sort of like, ragtag basketball. And they're not really playing against anyone. And it's all set up basketball. So, they're not really being challenged. Well, first of all, the challenge was, for the Globetrotters, is to go out there every day, and sometimes 2 and 3 times a day, and put on a show that would bring people out of their chair.
Fast action down the court. They drive the opposition dizzy as they juggle that ball in swift, deceptive passes that pay off with shots like this.
Abe Saperstein wanted to prove that his players were more than just clever clowns. So in 1948, the Globetrotters took on one of the best professional teams in the country. The Lakers were a Minneapolis team back then, and they were all white.
I had a great basketball team, but we had a great basketball team also, and we felt that we could beat anybody we played.
This time there was no clowning around. It came down to the final buzzer and a Globetrotter win. And to prove it was no fluke, the following year they beat the Lakers again. The doubters were silenced.
I believe it was at that time they really saw that we were not only a bunch of comedians out on the basketball court, but we could play basketball also. Of course, we knew it all the time.
So these guys were not only the greatest basketball players that were ever playing at that time, they were able to take their basketball and make it look so easy, and good that you can have fun just watching.
These boys know the game forward and backward, and when they decide to run up the score, they can get that ball through the basket by one way or another.
People paid to see the Globetrotters, but the Globetrotters didn't see much of that pay. What they did see was American racism on display. That part of the story when we come back.
If I was building my own news network, I think I'd want broad, in-depth knowledge of important issues throughout the world.
I would want to recruit a fairly diverse staff that had different life experiences before they came to news.
We want to see how we can help ourselves and help benefit other people, and not just see what's up with the celebrities and where they're going and traveling and buying this and buying that.
If I were to build my own news network, it would certainly have to reflect a diversity of culture, because that's the global situation, that's the global reality.
I would probably bring a lot of personal stories, really personal stories from the leaders of all countries.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
Vice News, every culture, every angle.
One of my favorite moments on the show was interviewing the author Taya Selassie. She wrote the New York Times bestseller Ghana Must Go, and she actually coined the phrase Afropolitan. And I feel like in part what this show speaks to is the Afropolitan audience. They're African, they're traveled, they're cosmopolitan, they're interested in the diaspora. That's what we deliver here, and Taya in many ways was the perfect embodiment of what I want our viewer to represent.
Arise serves underserved communities by bringing them news, information, sports, and entertainment from places that are becoming part of the world economy, that are becoming a part of the world voice, and decisions that are affecting things in the world that people care about. They care about the economy. They care about safety and security. And if you come to Arise and you watch our broadcast, these are the things we're going to bring to you every day, 24 hours a day.
The world went to war in the 1940s. After Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese, young Americans were sent overseas to fight. Segregation still divided the military, but men of color served with distinction. The president who ordered the deployment of nuclear weapons to end the war caused a different kind of explosion a few years later. In 1948, the year after Jackie Robinson broke Major League Baseball's color barrier, President Truman desegregated the U.S. Armed Forces by executive order.
The owners in the NBA didn't want blacks on their team.
It took until 1950, but finally, the National Basketball Association bowed to the winds of change. Although 5 black players were drafted, opportunities remained scarce. There appeared to be an unspoken limit. The NBA seemed, as one player put it, to just be adding a little pepper to each roster.
And when I came out of college, I couldn't go in the NBA anyway because they had a quota system.
I think the NBA was very, very fearful of what they saw in the abilities of so many great men of color playing the game.
But while the NBA was slow to add black players, it was quick to realize that the crowds came to see the Trotters.
The league would not have survived big-time basketball if the Globetrotters did play on the undercard of these teams.
We played on NBA cards because the NBA were not drawing people. People didn't want to come to see that type of basketball.
That's why the NBA at the time brought the Globetrotters in, because they weren't making money.
So we would play the first game, and after we played the first game, people started leaving. So the NBA changed it for us to play the second game, so people would stay to see the games.
They stayed, they cheered, and they clamored for autographs. But when the players left the arena, the Trotters confronted the ever-present ugly reality.
But when you put the uniform on, you became black again.
And it wasn't just in the American South.
Many people often think in terms of the South being heavily segregated, which it was. At the same time, it was also segregated. There was a lot of racism in the East and the North and the West and the Midwest, all over.
An experience in Ohio was all too typical. The owner of a local diner was thrilled to get their autographs. He was far less thrilled when they arrived at his diner later that night. He didn't want any of his customers to see them.
We wanted to eat dinner, and we couldn't eat dinner, you know, but the guy told us to come back. Abe brought us back like 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. They pulled down the shades, and then we ate.
Their time on the road was a constant challenge. Since they could not rely on being able to eat in restaurants, they had to often eat on the run.
Go to the grocery store and get bologna, some hand-sliced ham, a can of beans, or a can of sardines or whatever, a loaf of bread, and sit on the bus, make them up while we were riding.
And often they slept on the bus as well.
Sometimes in traveling all night long, there again we get back to the racism. It wasn't because that we had that far to go. It was because that we couldn't find a place to stay. There were a lot of hotels that we would try to register in. Though they might would have a vacancy sign up at the time that we went in the door. The time we attempted to register, then all of a sudden there was a no vacancy sign.
One player in the NBA asked me, were you as tough as we are in those days? And I had to explain to them, it's a different kind of toughness. The toughness that we had, you couldn't handle.
These were reality checks for us, really. It's like, you know, we speak of being celebrity stars and feeling good, but it was situations like this that really returned us to normal and made us understand that life is as it is and people are as they are.
Another stark reality came on payday.
When I started playing with the Trotters, I started on making $500 a month, okay? The next year, I got a raise of $100.
Theirs was a grueling schedule, playing a game almost every day, some days 2 or even 3. They were packing in the crowds, yet only making 1/6 of what the average white American was earning at the time.
You had to pay for your food, your laundry, you know, and all this. You don't get per diem. What's up, you know?
We were not businessmen. we were not businessmen, because if we were, we wouldn't have done what we did. We loved what we did. We had a passion for this.
They had to maintain that passion, even when they learned that Abe Saperstein routinely paid their competition more.
In most cases, he weren't playing his ball players as much as he was playing the traveling team that traveled with us. We found out that they were paying those fellas more money than we were getting.
They are past masters at tricky maneuvers to baffle the opposition.
Yes, he took advantage of blacks, no question about that.
It is basketball magic that has made the Trotters one of the outstanding attractions in the realm of sports.
Okay, you had the Globetrotters, you had their opponents, and you had the people who provide the halftime entertainment. Of the 3 entities, the Globetrotters paid the less of all. Now, the question arises, who did the fans come to see? The Globetrotters. But we were paid less than everybody.
Why we was paid less? Because he said, as long as you keep the taste of hamburger in their mouth, you can control them. But once they get a taste of steak, it's over.
Abe held all the cards. Players who resisted could find themselves heading to one of his less desirable teams, or worse.
And there were players also who were afraid to ask for a raise because of fear that Abe would chastise them for it or send them home.
Carl asked for a raise, and Abe came to me and said, what happened to Carl? He said, I give him a raise, 5,000 feet above sea level. He's flying home. That's a good raise. And I said, yeah, beautiful raise.
You know you're not being paid competitively, but you try and not let it affect you to the extent that you cannot exist as a man.
We weren't making a whole lot of money like the other people were making, but you couldn't tell it. When we went to the gym, we did not go in jeans and clogs. It was a fashion show. It was a fashion show, and we didn't have the money to do it, man, but it was a fashion show. We went in there because we enjoyed what we did.
Basketball's latest sensation, a 7-foot scoring whiz named Wilt Chamberlain.
One exception was Wilt Chamberlain. Already famous from his college team, he was destined for the NBA. In between, he filled a lifelong dream of becoming a Globetrotter, and his salary reflected his marquee status.
And when Wilt came, and he got $65,000, everybody's eyes popped.
Wilt the Stilt went on to bigger paydays with the NBA, but what he found with the Globetrotters was something money could not buy.
The fraternity of the Globetrotters, the family of the Globetrotters, and being able to become part of the Globetrotters was probably the most rewarding experience in my basketball career. We knew that we were like a symphony, you know what I'm saying? The only people that could compare To us, and we used to laugh at, would be like Count Basie's band. That's how well they played together. And that's what the Globies were. I mean, they were like really a fist that was all like together. No separate fingers. They were together, and when they're on that court, they were together.
And like the jazz greats, the Globetrotters found that doors opened wider for them outside the United States. The basketball ambassadors, when we return.
If I was building my own news network, I think I'd want broad, in-depth knowledge of important issues throughout the world.
I would want to recruit a fairly diverse staff that had different life experiences before they came to news.
We want to see how we can help ourselves and benefit other people, not just see what's up with the celebrities and where they're going and traveling and buying this and buying that.
If I were to build my own news network, it would certainly have to reflect a diversity of culture, because that's the global situation, that's the global reality.
I would probably bring a lot of personal stories, really personal stories from the leaders of all countries.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people who from all over who are very connected and diverse.
Provides news, every culture, every angle.
The best part of the day for me is when Arise America goes on the air. It's the opportunity for me to tell the stories that I've learned about all day long, and also to talk to some of the smartest, most experienced experts on any number of news topics and explain not just what's happening, but what it means to us. That's the one thing that's great about Arise America. We don't just tell the news, we also seek to understand why it matters.
Because we live in a global, interconnected world, business news no longer stops when the markets close on Wall Street. And what we've discovered over the past few years of the financial crisis is that events and news that happen even in the smallest countries impact the United States and the world at large. As we bring together experts and analysts and thought leaders and CEOs and companies across many industries to not only provide the macroeconomic view, but news everyday people can use.
The Harlem Globetrotters live right up to their name. They have appeared in nearly every country around the globe on numerous tours to all parts of the world. They have been seen by enthusiastic audiences in most of the major cities of Asia.
We was like the ambassadors of goodwill.
Their name, after all, is Globetrotters. They brought their special brand of basketball abroad, winning fans everywhere they went.
I travel the world and people would say, oh, you're a basketball player? And I go, yeah. They say, well, who you play with? I said, the Globetrotters. And you could see their eyes light up. They only knew one team, the Harlem Globetrotters.
In Europe, we were really regarded as big stars, you know, and this is in the 50s when we drive up to a hotel in London or whatever, there'd be people all over the place. It was, you know, kind of way out just to come from Harlem and to be so young, traveling with people asking for autographs.
They knew they were representing not just their country, but black pride, and they represented both in style.
If you can imagine guys traveling for 8, 9, 10, 11 months a year, 2 suitcases, one was their basketball stuff, other was what they're wearing as far as their clothes for the rest of the day, evening. These guys were classic. I mean, you want to talk about GQ? Classic. So I'm telling you, when they came off of that court and they put on their clothes, their civilian clothes, and walked out onto the Champs-Élysées, you know, they were true representatives of the human race.
So we walking down the Champs-Élysées in Paris, you know, East Berlin, and, you know, it's great.
Of course, the Globetrotters were not the first ambassadors of Black America. Europeans had long ago embraced jazz, and the musicians had paved the way.
They were going through the same thing to a degree that we were going through, you know, not being truly accepted, you know, at home and really being the man on the road.
When it was time for an exhibition of American basketball behind the Iron Curtain, it was the Harlem Globetrotters who made the historic trip. In 1959, they became ambassadors of goodwill. At the peak of the Cold War, they warmed the hearts of communists in Moscow.
We actually saw history being made. We were part of this thing that was happening. And we look at that, as I look at it now, I said, wow, was I a part of that?
Now think about it. The first Americans to go up there, and so it was a group of black guys that went back there representing America.
One reason the Globetrotters were so celebrated in the Soviet Union was for political propaganda. Just as singer and activist Paul Robeson sought the acceptance denied him in America and became a Soviet media darling, the Russians were quick to point out the paradox of black men representing a country where they were oppressed.
And I realized that they weren't blind to the fact that even though we were ambassadors and whatever, we weren't really treated like first-class Americans, back in our own homeland.
You are seeing the Harlem Globetrotters, the champions of champions, pile up a top score in basketball fun.
But everybody brought something different to the table. When you put everything on top of the table, we had a feast.
These are the moves that enchanted fans and frustrated the competition. Skills honed over the course of hundreds, if not thousands of games. Skills that are still remembered many years later. It has been more than a half-century since the Globetrotters became stars. Now the NBA is a global brand. Salaries are in the stratosphere. Racism is still a part of American life and even basketball. But the legacy of the Globetrotters shines on. In 2002, the team was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. And the game they taught the world to play can be seen everywhere from the nearest playground to Olympic stadiums.
Now here's the thing that's most amazing to me, and no one touches on it right now, is the fact is that the NBA today is totally the Harlem Globetrotters. It's all now about entertainment.
They said that we played schoolyard basketball because we could jump and run fast, and this is what they play now in the NBA.
When I see somebody pass the ball behind their back, or dribble behind their back, the first thing I say, right on.
Before the NBA, for men of color, came the Globetrotters.
Owners in the NBA didn't want blacks on their team.
I felt great to put on that red, white, and blue uniform with the stars on it and run on that court and hear all these thousands of people yelling and screaming.
But when you put the uniform on, you became black again.
I think the NBA was very, very fearful of what they saw in the abilities of so many great men of color playing the game.
In Europe, we were really regarded as big stars.
There's a lot of racism in the East and the North and the West and the Midwest, all over.
So we walking down the Champs-Élysées in Paris, and it's great.
Now here's the thing that's most amazing to me, is the fact is that the NBA today is totally the Harlem Globetrotters. It's all now about entertainment.
We put the fun in the game.